The thing that really sparked my my wanting to be a scientist was I read the biography of Marie Curie when I was like 7 years old, and so I read it, and I read it not only once, but I read it twice, and I decided then that I wanted to grow up and win a Nobel Prize, because Marie Curie was the first woman to win 2 Nobel Prizes, the Nobel Prize in Physics and the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So from a little child, I guess I sort of worshipped Marie Curie, because back then there was no television. Television hadn't been invented yet. There was no stimulus anywhere, because there were no women's science teachers. There were no information about careers for women, because when I started school, let's see, I graduated in 1960, so that would have meant 12 years earlier. I started to school, and that would have been in 1948. So when you think about it, I just showed you this story about the Gilbert chemistry set in 1954. Well, remember, I started to school before then, and so but I just grew up, and I always had a curiosity about things, and so I guess it sparked me. And then finally, what really culminated my opportunity was I had a good science teacher in 8th grade, and then I started high school in 1956. And at the beginning of the school, myself and 16 boys signed a petition, because the school we were going to didn't offer physics, and I knew I wanted to take physics because, Marie Curie, physics. And so I signed a petition with the 16 boys to offer a physics course at my high school my senior year. And so, sure enough, they began planning to offer physics my senior year. So I had to take chemistry my junior year, because they wouldn't let you take 2 science courses in the same year. So I took chemistry in my junior year, and the teacher would always pick. I was a good student because I was really good in math in elementary, because I would listen. I went to a 1-room school, and all 8 grades were in 1 room. And so I'd watch, so we had like 10 minutes for each class. So I would do my class, and then I'd do the assignment, and then I'd listen to all the others. And I learned the math with all the other kids. So on Fridays, they used to have math contests. And even when I was really young, I'd get up there and I'd compete with the 8th graders. And I was really good in math. So when I started high school, I signed the petition. And then they told me I had to take chemistry my junior year. I took it, and then my high school chemistry teacher would pick 2 students out of the class. And they wanted us to study the whole book and complete the book by January, so we could attend the state chemistry contest and participate in the academic contests. And so I did. I finished the book by January. And back then, I went to school in eastern Oklahoma, over at Shakota, Oklahoma. And we went to southeastern Oklahoma State University. It's where we went for the academic contest. And so I went, and I won. I won first place in the whole state contest. Well, that was, remember, I started school in 1956. Guess what happened? On October the 4th, 1957, Russia launched Sputnik. And it changed forever my life, because suddenly the whole government, the whole U.S. said we're behind in they didn't call it STEM then, they called it in the science race. And so they asked, the president actually gave an ultimatum to the National Science Foundation, which, by the way, was created in 1950. They asked them to create programs for young people to try to get more young people to go into science. And so they created, National Science Foundation created summer academies for high school students. And I'm sure that my chemistry teacher, because I took chemistry my junior year, which would have been 58, and after I won that contest, he entered me, he sent in my application for the National Science Foundation Summer Academy. It was in chemical engineering. Oklahoma High School Institute for Chemical Engineers. And ta-da, I was selected. We didn't have a telephone at home. I was a country kid. I grew up picking cotton and working in the fields. And so they got me out of history class and called me to the phone like in 1st of March. 1st of March, like the end of February, 1st of March, something like that, and told me that I'd been accepted to Summer Academy. So anyway, I went to that 6-week Summer Academy and came home with a slide rule with my name engraved on it and never looked back at all. That was my first. Someone asked me, I spoke last weekend at Midwestern University. I was their senior seminar speaker, and one of the boys asked me, said, did you ever have any setbacks or anything that you felt was trying to hold you back? And I said, oh yes, many times. And he said, well, how did you handle it? And I said, I just worked harder, because that's what you have to do. If things don't go your way, you just work harder. You work harder, and that's what I've always tried to do here at Cameron. When the rest of the people are gone home for the day, I'm many times here still working at night. But I don't know, I just loved chemistry from the very beginning, and I loved teaching it, so it was the right thing for me to do, I think. I like the physics part, but it doesn't turn me on the way chemistry does.
I was going to say, I definitely understand that, and that honestly perfectly segued into kind of my next question there, which is, I know you just talked about like how like with setbacks, stuff like that, you just kind of like push harder. And so that kind of leads to my next question there, which is, I know a lot of scientists, since this field really just has you hit brick walls a lot of the time, there's a lot of self-doubt, as in like, can I do this? Am I able to? And so I want to ask, what's kind of like your thought process when you kind of get hit with those kind of like moments where you're unsure if you're able to?
I never felt like that I couldn't do it. I knew I could. It was just that I realized that there were barriers for women from the very beginning, just like there have been barriers for minorities and for other interest groups. But I knew I could do it. I was good. I was good at what I did, and I knew I'd be a good teacher. I would have been a good engineer. I got to go to a summer internship between my junior and senior year, but I don't know. I sent out 40 resumes, and nobody would hire me. They weren't ready for women back then. And so I went to Plan B. I decided, okay, if I can't get a job I had a lot of chemistry and a lot of physics, and so I found out that I could get a degree in chemical education in 1 year. And so I went to school at Northeastern, and they let me complete, because I had so many classes, they let me count my chemical engineering as physics or chemistry. So I graduated with a double degree in physics and chemistry, and couldn't get a job. I thought I wanted to go into industry because I was sort of down on education at that point. Couldn't get a job. And so I walked into at the end of the 3 years, I had been a teaching assistant while I was at OSU. And I went in to see my major professor, and he said, Ann, what are you going to do when you finish? And I said, well, I sent out 40 resumes again, and no response. And he said, why don't you teach? He said, you're a wonderful teacher. He picks up the phone before I could do anything, and he called Cameron. It's getting into ta-da. And 56 years later, here I am still at Cameron.
Honestly, I think it's all really, really amazing. And so I'm going to go ahead and push on to sort of my last question, which I guess you've probably answered, I think, this about a million times, if not explicitly, which is, what advice do you have for new scientists or people who are aspiring to be scientists?
Well, if they like science, I encourage them, because there's so many opportunities. Every time, I remember thinking, it's all been done. There have been so many discoveries. And since I've come here, I don't know how many times I've said, I'm so glad that I've lived this long, that I have an infrared, an Fourier transform, FTIR down there, that I can put a a piece of fiber on the diamond and bounce a beam off of it. And you were there that summer, I think. We had this kid give me a piece of skin, and we bounced the beam, and I got an infrared spectra of human skin. and it doesn't change. It keeps on going. And so Dr. Ebekai, I was showing him how to use the NMR earlier this week. We have a tabletop NMR. Well, when I started, the NMR was invented in the 40s, late 40s. And so when I came along, my NMR was as big as this much of the room, and I spent my day, that's where I lived, in that lab, and I would get up and shim it every day. And now I have a microwave reactor where I can do chemical reactions in 10 minutes that used to take 14 hours. So it's a really exciting time to be a scientist, because every time I think that we've discovered it all, then we're doing something even better. And now we're doing AI, artificial intelligence, to do a lot of things. So I don't think it's going to slow down. I think there's always going to be exciting times for people like me, because, like I said, I never dreamed in my lifetime I would see so many changes, and how exciting it has been. You know, even when I remember when the liquid crystal was first invented, you know, you touch it and ta-da, and it's chemistry. And the transistor, I remember my first transistor radio, well, that's physics, you know, and I feel so blessed to have grown up in the era when I've grown up as a scientist. But I think the younger people are going to have this same experience, because I don't think it's going to change. We're just getting better. We're getting smaller. We're getting nano. We're getting so small and being able to do so many things. And it's such an exciting time. That used to take 30 minutes. And it just keeps on going and going and going. So I feel so blessed to live in this life and to have observed all the changes. And you guys are going to see it. And look now what we can do. We can correct the eye with a laser and have it see again. It's perfect vision, 40/40. We can do major surgery with a laser without ever cutting the skin. So there's been, so anyway, I just think it's really an exciting time to live in. And I think the younger people are going to see the same thing. Because like I said, I never dreamed in my lifetime I would see this. And I love it. I love living the life I've lived and being able to celebrate all the wonderful changes in chemistry and physics and all the sciences. So yeah, I would say for young people, it's a good time to be a scientist.